As many of you have no doubt heard, Apple has selected a new CEO. His name is John Ternus, and he is a hardware engineer. So, Apple has decided that in September 2026, John Ternus would take over Apple, and that Apple will be led from the perspective of an engineer. And I think that Steve Jobs and Tim Cook has done a great job. And this idea of having a hardware engineer run Apple comes at a great time. So Apple has done a phenomenal job, from what I can tell, with the MacBook Neo. The MacBook Neo is a lower cost MacBook that people can purchase as an alternative to the low end Windows laptops. The low end Windows laptops filled a really vital need for people that needed computers to do a variety of things, to fill out job applications, keep up on the news, do entry level work tasks and other things. But there was always a problem with the entry level Windows laptops. And so the MacBook Neo finally brings low end pricing to a high end device that people can access and use in a much more reliable and consistent way than they would have experienced with Windows laptops at the same price point. And when we think about what MacBook Neo represents, it represents a response to a recession. Now, there are many economists and other officials who say we're not in a recession. So I'm not an economist, and so none of this that I'm saying should be taken as factual. And this is for information purposes only. But it is my view that we have been in a recession for the last 14 months. So, with that said, I think that the moves Apple is making to pivot their products so that they are more accessible to people that don't have the disposable income that they may have had years ago is a smart move and would maintain their momentum in terms of their relevance to the wider market. With John Ternus as the CEO of Apple, with a hardware perspective, he helped oversee the transition from Intel to the M series chips. He has been the manager for AirPods, Mac, iPads, and he is going to influence Apple, in my view, to optimize the product. The reason why that's important is many criticize Apple for innovation. And I guess that criticism is fair, depending on your point of view. But one of the things that I've learned being involved in software engineering for 2 decades is that the quality of your foundation, the quality of your overall architecture has more of an impact on the experience and the productivity of those that use the software platforms and the technology platforms than, say, having some new idea or new functionality that does not work half the time. We see this with some of the AI products that are out now, where if you put in a tremendous amount of effort, you may be able to pull out some great capabilities from the AI. But in the ordinary case, more ordinarily, you will see that people are having struggles with AI as a new product category, to the order of, I believe some researchers have found that greater than 80% of projects involving AI struggle, and that the productivity gains to software developers who don't use AI in the most rigorous way creates problems for those software developers. And there are many headlines here recently that show that companies are struggling in their use of AI to maintain momentum that they may have gained earlier from vibe coding. And when they now have to modify the products that AI helped them produce, that they're not able to keep up with what AI originally allowed them to develop when they sprinted out the gate. So, a real engineer is someone that is going to um, very rigorously observe the process. They're going to measure. They're going to approach situations with a large degree of measure. And they're going to look at what works and what doesn't and calibrate accordingly and push for consistency, reliability, and an expansion of performance and capacity based on what can be trusted. And that is something I think is going to benefit Apple more than coming up with new features more quickly, where you might be able to get some hype, you might be able to get some traction. But if they are features or new spin on old ideas that don't really serve the customer, then in the end, you're not going to make as much of a gain as you would expect. But then the other point is that when you optimize the product, when you double down on quality, you double down on engineering rigor, you ensure that you have a higher quality bar that you meet and actually meet it, then the people who buy the products can have those products and use those products for a longer period of time. Now, some people who manufacture products, they are not in favor of that particular approach because whether some want to call it planned obsolescence or whatever other name you want to ascribe to the strategy of building products that are fit enough for purpose, in which that they're good enough and they have a long enough, let's say, run cycle, maybe 2 years, maybe 4 years max, and then you have a replacement cycle that kicks off after that. And that creates a more predictable set of financial measures from the financing standpoint, right? But when you look at it, those that have to go through that replenishment cycle more frequently, they also have an opportunity to make other choices. So if Apple products didn't last as long, then their customers would have more frequent opportunities to consider Samsung, to consider, Google, to consider alternatives to Apple products in the different categories, right? Bose instead of AirPods, right? And so the thing is that when you have product longevity, then you also gain the ability to maximize the revenue on those platforms. So Apple under Cook has pushed for services, and some people are fans of that, and some are not. But when you improve those services, and those services are genuinely valuable, including the apps that help deliver those services, and you have a hardware platform that is tweaked and is engineered to last longer and to sustain performance over a longer period of time, then you're going to have a much better experience for the customer, and you will build brand loyalty much more than you would if you had something that excited people for a few months, maybe a year, and then the excitement died off, and now what are you left with? So I think John Ternus' term as CEO of Apple will be beneficial, and it definitely aligns with one of my biggest criticisms of the tech industry, in that we don't take enough time, often enough, to slow down and look at the actual flaws in our products and services and platforms and infrastructure. We don't take enough time to say, okay, let's stop moving so fast, shipping so fast, and breaking things like you have in the web development arena, and let's just stop and make this better. Let's improve what we have. Let's take it to the highest level we can, and then once we are there and we have no more opportunity for optimization of this particular component, feature, or even concept, then let's look at making a transition to the next level. And we have examples of that in the real world. We just simply don't experience that in mainstream brands as often as we would like. And that's why I tend to look at Apple more favorably, because they align with an engineering ethos that I find very favorable. And that is, try to build it right the first time as much as you can. Try to build in as much quality as you can, and have an intentional focus about that. And the statements from Apple over the decades, from Steve Jobs onwards, and the actual areas of their products that they focused on, such as the aluminum casing for the computers and for the other products, the way that they focused on sound and video and camera quality, all those little details, they matter tremendously. So then when I, as a software developer, if I'm building software on an Apple platform, I know that I'm going to have a much better time reaching the level of quality in my actual software product that I'm trying to build. And I don't have to worry as much about my customers experiencing destabilizing situations where the operating system suddenly freezes or crashes, right? Because that's part of the overall user experience. So that's why I like Apple. I am pro Linux, and I definitely advocate for Linux. And I would say that when or to the extent that we can, in the Linux environment, take a page from Apple in terms of optimization, then we can see better results. But I wanted to chime in on the entire transition that I saw with Apple, and what I see as a positive development with MacBook Neo. And I will see you later.